gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Hello and welcome to a new edition of Political Smackdown. So we're taping on Friday, October the 18th, and yesterday as we tape was the first day of early in-person voting across North Carolina, including 4 sites in Cleveland County. And we've got a little chart put up if you don't know where to vote. It'll show you where those 4 sites are in Shelby at the LeGrand Center, Patrick Senior Center in Kings Mountain, the Boiling Springs Town Hall, and at the Cleveland County Water Office in Lawndale, not the new one in Shelby, the one in Lawndale. And there are the dates and times, 8 to 7:30 Monday through Friday, 8 to 3 on Saturday, and 1 to 5 on Sunday, except the last Sunday before the election, there is no Sunday voting. It closes out on Saturday the 2nd. So if you want to go and vote early, there's the places and the times. So we had a pretty good turnout, I guess, yesterday. We know at least one of our crew, Roger Harris, who has joined us in Betsy's place, went and voted yesterday. Roger, how did it go?
It was busy. I voted yesterday at the LeGrand Center, got here about 2 o'clock, which unfortunately was about the time the early college was dismissing at about that same time, so there was a lot of traffic. Took about an hour and 5 minutes to vote. I did drive by the Boiling Springs Town Hall yesterday morning and it looked like Kmart on Christmas Eve out there. Folks lined up to vote out there. People really like early voting. That's just something that folks like. There's lines across North Carolina before dawn yesterday. I am aware that there are some counties that will actually publish the wait times at the different locations. And I don't know how hard that would do, but to make that happen, but I think that'd be a good thing. Western North Carolina voting, I think that was a challenge. Maybe we can talk about that, but I know the numbers Mike has shared with me before the program started were down a little bit in Cleveland County, but I think they were all at the LeGrand Center yesterday.
Well, I think 1,700 and something of them were at the LeGrand Center out of 3,976 early in-person votes cast on day one in Cleveland County. By comparison, I looked up 2020, there were 4,322 on day one. So we were down, 300 and some odd votes on day one. Statewide, we were up 5,000 on day one. That's not a lot. Went from 348 to 353 in round numbers from 2020. Some counties like Gaston were up considerably, Andy, and others like Buncombe, which is most surprised. Buncombe was down 3,000 from 11 to 8 in round numbers on day one, but I'm not surprised given all the issues with the hurricane. So Andy, anything you want to say about day one? And also, let's get started and talk about, is the impact of the hurricane going to impact either party in Western North Carolina more than the other?
Well, I think when you start to look, especially addressing the Western North Carolina, where you look at where most are, let's just say Democrats. Most Democrats in the Western Interstate are clustered around larger areas such as Asheville or the college towns like Cullowhee or Boone. That's where most of them are. The Republicans tend to be really scattered out in the more rural areas. So how's that going to affect? Well, the Democrats are going to be in those areas where they're going to be able to more easily vote because you're going to have more power and it'll be easier for them. But the State Board of Elections is bending over backwards to make this easier for those that are out in these far-flung areas that who knows when they're going to have power. But really, to be honest, when are they going to have roads that's going to allow them to be able to come in and out easier, to have bridges and all that sort of thing? So they're trying to make sure that every qualified voter is going to have access to a ballot. That's the crux of it. When it gets down to numbers, probably it's not going to be that much different because when you get further out, people get more and more sparse. In the urban areas, they're concentrated. So when it's all said and done, probably not that much difference. But the main thing, my thing is if they're eligible to vote, by golly, we've got to make it as easy as we can to allow a qualified voter to vote. But by the same token, it's incumbent upon that voter, they've got to make an effort too. We can't carry them on a sedan chair from back on top of the mountain till they're voting. They've got to make an effort. We're going to make our effort to make it where they can do their American right to exercise their ballot, but they've got to make the effort too.
Well, Wes, one thing I've noticed in looking at the stats for day one is across the state in several counties I've looked at, there are more Republicans early voting than ever before, which for the first time, I think there's been an effort by Republicans not to wait till the last day. What are your thoughts on how it might impact Western North Carolina and early voting generally?
Well, I just would correct Andy. It's not just qualified voters. It also is Democrat voters. So we're getting everybody, not just the ones who are qualified.
Devil-
Thank you for picking me up on that one,
Devil's
Mike.
going to get
Well,
you.
Well, I might get him before it's over with.
at a minimum, you should have said Wes, Wes, Wes.
I'm going to smack his bald head.
No,
That's what I'm going to do.
I think the Board of Elections is doing a good job trying to get Western North Carolina full access to the ballot box, and I think that's great. I do think there's a potential bigger impact that would hurt Republicans, but I think the next week or so is going to bear that out, what gets open. They're making a lot of progress in Western North Carolina. But yes, Andy, people have to actually turn out. They have to make an effort, and I hope they make an effort looking down the ballot, looking at names, looking at people, looking at policies. But I think first day was a good start. I stopped by LeGrand on my way in here this morning. They're apparently having a good turnout again this morning. And of course, you know how it is running the gauntlet. There are a good number of people, candidates out there that can offer sample ballots, and who the conservatives are, who the progressives are.
All right, Roger, we'll move on back to you. Anything else you want to say? But I just wonder if y'all think we're going to have any surprises in our local or state elections? Anybody looking for something that's going to be a surprise?
I don't know if surprise is the right word, but I think there's going to be a big change on the Cleveland County Board of Education. You know, there's more white men on the Board of Education than there is in a NASCAR race. And I believe that there's going to be at least one woman on the board this time. I think Gloria Sherman is not only going to win, I believe that lady's going to be the #1 vote getter. And that all-boys club is going to be mixed up at least a little.
And I'll say this, you hold her on with that crowd
Yes,
too.
she will. Yes, she will. That old principal is going to come out.
Yep.
So that might not be a surprise, but it will be a change, as you know. You looking for any surprises anywhere up and down the ballot?
Not really. I mean, I don't really see, most of the changes we thought we were going to see happened in the primary. I think at Coleman Hunt, if anybody's got a shot on the Democratic side in the school board, it's going to be him. I really think that I've heard a lot of Republicans have said some really good things about Coleman and about that maybe that was a mistake for him to get kicked out last time. So I think you might see some buyer's remorse on that and come back and maybe put
Can he
him
be qualified and have a Kamala sign in his front yard?
Absolutely he can. There's no doubt, and that overly qualifies him if you want to know the truth of the matter.
So Wes, what are you thinking? See any surprises coming up and down the ballot?
I don't think so. I think the surprise was the news that broke on the Republican candidate for governor a few weeks ago. I think the only question is what's that going to do down ballot? I think Cleveland County is now a Republican county, and that's changed in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And I feel like our Republican candidate's going to do well.
Well, I noticed in the October, it came out the 17th of October, Carolina Journal poll, that there's been a good bit of shift. And where you did have earlier in their polling 7 Republicans ahead in council of state races, the 10 governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and down the line, it's 5 and 5 now. And Mark Robinson is way behind in their poll like he is in a lot of others. So I think whether it's a surprise or not, the impact of the problems that our candidate for governor has had and how they may or may not impact other council of state races.
I think it's gonna be some reverse coattails going on.
But the one that has kind of confused me a little bit, Mike, is on the superintendent of education. I would have thought there would be, I mean, let's face it, y'all threw out a Republican superintendent for a woman who really doesn't believe.
When you say y'all, say the Republicans. I voted for her.
Okay. Well, let's say, well, y'all are Republicans, aren't you? Of course, I don't know Wes, it depends on the day for him, but that's beside the point. I mean, who I thought, I'm not an educator, so I just watched, but I thought she had done a good job from what I saw.
She was a fair superintendent.
That's what I thought, and we've got a lady running who really doesn't seem to be that in favor of a public education for our kids. I mean, that's what I don't understand, is why throw out somebody who thought was doing a good job? I mean, from people I've talked to,
I
liked
think
her.
she's one of the 5 that was narrowly ahead. I'm talking about a part of 1% in that Carolina Journal poll, so that's probably going to be close because the other candidate's pretty far left, so I don't know what'll happen there. All right, let's move on to another topic related to the election. You're going to have on your ballot when you go to vote this year one constitutional amendment. There were several talked about, but only one made it, and we've got a picture of it to put on, and I'll read it. And this is the constitutional amendment you will have the opportunity to vote for or against. A constitutional amendment to provide that only a citizen of the United States who is 18 years of age and otherwise possessing the qualifications for voting shall be entitled to vote at any election in the state. I sent these fellas 2 or 3 articles that show several states already have this, less than 10, something like this encoded in their constitutions. And Andy, it's been brought about because Vermont, the District of Columbia, Maryland, several places in California are now allowing illegal aliens to vote in local and state elections. They can't in federal elections because of a federal law that says you can't unless you're a citizen. And one thing to please understand is this does not impact naturalized citizens who were not born here but have become citizens. It only impacts those who are not American citizens. So you think this is a for or against? Will it pass or fail?
Well, I think most people are confused on this because, Mike, I am, because I was always under assumption that the U.S. Constitution superseded anything on the state or local level, that you have to be a citizen of the United States to cast a ballot, period. It didn't matter if it was local, state, county, didn't matter. You had to be a citizen. Now, I'm not a constitutional scholar. Now, and I would yield to Roger, who is the closest thing to a constitutional scholar we've got here
That's
today.
a broad definition, brother.
Well, that's the closest we got. So, I mean, but to me, I just always thought that was the standard. And so I'm really confused about it. I really am. And I can't imagine other people probably feel the same way I am. They're confused about it.
Well, from Ballotpedia, I found out there are several places, including Oakland and San Francisco in California, the District of Columbia, different places in Maryland, a lot of them, and in Vermont that have allowed this. And I think the legislature's concern is just not to allow it anywhere in the state. Wes, what are your thoughts?
Well, and not that many people actually follow the Constitution anymore, Andy. Whether or not that's clear, it's certainly clear for federal elections. The problem is many localities and states are now allowing non-citizens to vote. And this is an attempt by North Carolina to ensure that Mecklenburg or Orange County or wherever doesn't allow non-citizens to vote.
And to me, that's unconstitutional.
To
That they should not be allowed. You should be, the Constitution is very clear on it.
So you would support this amendment
Yes.
to the North Carolina Constitution?
I would.
Good, I would too. I think I'm gonna mark that ballot twice, put one out beside it again.
If that makes you
This
feel
is a
better.
no-brainer, Mike.
So Roger, you do study things like this. What are your thoughts?
This is a solution in search of a problem. I think we could call
Not
this.
in many areas.
Well, but not, those areas are not within 1,000 miles of the North Carolina border.
Yeah, Maryland is.
There's
Maryland's
some-
way
there's
within
somewhere else.
1,000 miles in the
This is the
District of
redundant
Columbia.
amendment. You know, it is confusing because Andy
really
says,
is.
you know, in 2018, we had an amendment about hunting and fishing. We were going to protect people's rights to
Yep.
hunting and fishing, and folks said, gee, I didn't know it was under threat. Well, it wasn't, and neither is this. It is already in the 14th Amendment, and it is in the 5th article of the North Carolina Constitution that only citizens can vote. This thing is not going to change a thing in North Carolina.
It's going to make them feel better.
It's going to make them feel better, and there is a lot of misinformation out there that some people have accepted that there's tons of non-citizens voting, and it's to fire up the base just like the hunting and fishing one did.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything. You know, maybe next time we can have a North Carolina constitutional amendment that only stars can come out at night. I don't know.
I think it's very proactive. I'm glad it's being done. This should be enshrined in the Constitution, and the fact of the matter is, this is coming to these left-wing progressive areas to ensure that they can continue.
But should we
tax
pass
and spend.
every constitutional amendment to prohibit something that has not happened and there's no problem, but it might happen somewhere out there in the future?
That could be
We-
anything.
you know, that could be anything.
If
in
you
the
understand the
Constitution.
I think we
nature of how
enshrine the rights.
progressivism works,
Why,
yes.
why not go ahead and take it to the U.S. Supreme Court and settle it? And settle it.
Yep.
Because this is state law, not federal law.
Well, but it is already enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. Take it to there and say, yes, it goes
But it
down to
only
the
has
state
been
and
applied
local.
by the courts to federal elections.
That's
But,
not to
it
state
supersedes
elections.
everything else, Mike, so
But the
that it needs
courts
to go
have
down.
not said it applies to state.
But now is the
elections.
time to have the
Only if they're
interpretation
federal.
down.
But do we need to have a constitutional amendment because Frogville, Vermont decided they wanted people to vote for local dog catcher? And we're going to change the North Carolina
Yeah, because a
Constitution.
lot of those people are moving to North Carolina.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
they'll do it here when they get a chance.
Absolutely.
Vote for it, and it can't do anything but help, and it can't hurt. We'll be back for the second half of the show, and hopefully we'll have more lively discussion.
Hi, I'm Deb Harden, host of For Your Information. The goal of our show is to educate and entertain you about all things pets throughout Cleveland County. We have various guests joining me each month to talk about dogs, cats, pigs, whatever kind of pet you can think of. Also each month, we will be joined by some furry friends looking for their forever homes. For your information each month, right here on C19 TV and online at www.c19.tv.
She gets her hair from her mom, her eyes from her dad, and her drugs from her home medicine cabinet. Fact: more people die from drug overdoses than from car crashes or gun violence. And over 50% of those deaths are from prescription drugs. Prescription drug abuse is preventable. 1. Secure and take regular inventory of our medications. 2. Dispose of unused or expired medications. 3. Share this message with others. Be aware, don't share, lock your meds.
Welcome back to second half Political Smackdown. We do have a local issue we're going to talk about for a few moments today. This past week at the school board meeting for Cleveland County, on an 8-1 vote, they passed resolutions that, one, give the old Graham School property they closed down a couple of years ago to Cleveland County through an agreement between the county and the school system. They have to offer it to the county first. As I understand the agreement, if the county sells it for some kind of private development, any net proceeds the county gets will go to the school capital funding account for schools. But if it's used for a public purpose, then there will not be any money to change hands. On the Marion School, the county was not interested, and so the school board passed a resolution to offer that to the city of Shelby. At this stage of the game, I don't know if they've had talks with Shelby and Shelby has a purpose, but they're going to at least offer to sell it to the city of Shelby. So, Wes, get us started on this one. Is this a good thing, bad thing? And I guess we ought to just get about the politics of it. Are there some politics here of getting this done before the election?
Oh, there's no politics anywhere around, Mike. You know, the school board laid out their rationale for not needing these properties, what, a year and a half, 2 years ago? Both schools were underoccupied. They felt like the resources could be better used elsewhere. Mike, you and I both went to Graham Elementary, if I
did.
remember right. It was a
correct.
much newer building when you were there than it was when I went through.
He was still tying his dinosaur up in the front when he was going.
But, you know, that prime piece of property, and of course, nearly in my backyard, a lot of land. I think there's a lot of good use for the county,
20-something
potentially,
acres.
the city. Marion, again, very stable, well-established neighborhood. I hope the city can find use for it. But I think by and large, the school board is doing a good job trying to be as efficient as possible with the resources. And of course, the reason it goes to the county first is because the county taxpayers paid for all the school properties.
Right.
So this is all state law. This is nothing unusual.
Roger, you're a former school board member, or you think this was the right thing?
I think it was the right thing. If you don't have any use for the property and property just sits, whether it's an empty house or an empty school, that property deteriorates. Graham School, probably what's more appealing than the building itself is the land that it sits on. It's a nice flat land in a good location. It's not unusual. School boards have done this for a long time. We sold Polkville School a number of years ago, and South Cleveland, West Cleveland, and Dover Elementary, and the old Bowling Springs School in across from the campus. So nothing unusual there. One thing I think that we will see probably in this contract is after the experience with the North Shelby School, I expect there'll be a provision in there about when you've got to come up with the money prior to that. So that was something need to be corrected.
Well, Andy,
there was a provision in that cell.
Yeah, but it was not
But
tight.
it was
these guys are
adjusted.
avoiding politics. It was an 8-1 vote. Who was the one who didn't want to sell either one of these?
That would be Mr. Danny Bland.
And what
Mike,
was
you're
his
just trying to
rationale?
stir up trouble.
Well, but no, it needs to be brought out because Danny had a real thought out reason for it, which that's good for Danny. He really thinks that is something that should be saved for future growth because what he's thinking about, and Mike, you and I in real estate, we know about the growth that has been projected for around that end of the county. The old Blanton farm has been sold. I forget how many acres, and there's projections. I don't know how many hundreds of homes and other, industrial, retail, that sort of thing. And the thinking is that is where the next growth is going to come in this county. And with growth comes homes, comes families, and there comes the kids. So I think Danny's thought is that would be the perfect place for a new school, and it makes sense. The topography of it is just phenomenal. I mean, and be honest, if that ever comes on the public market, somebody's going to snatch that thing up, and there won't be any dragging around trying to get it closed. Some developer will yank that up and nothing flat, and it will go for top dollar. There's no doubt. And that's what Danny's thoughts are on and why he has continually voted against. Marion, not as much. That one will be more of maybe a city park or something along those lines. It's not enough land to really do anything other than that with.
But Mr. Blanton voted against that one as well.
Well, he's trying to be consistent.
Okay.
So I'll give him that. But that's the main thing is the one with Graham. That's the one that could have the most impact.
Well, it's an interesting development, and the timing of it is before a new school board with several new members will likely be, 2 or 3 new members are likely to
at
be.
least 2, yeah.
At least 2 will be new. And whether that would change, one of the things that's interesting is Mr. Grigg, who has often voted with Danny, voted to make the sale.
Yep.
So he's been persuaded it was the right thing to do. So it is a part and parcel to have differences of opinion, and we hope all this works out well for the schools and for Cleveland County. Very quickly, there's been some movement in the last 2 or 3 weeks that's been noticeable in the swing state polls and even in the national polls. Kamala Harris even agreed to do an interview with Brett Baer on Fox. I don't think she did very well, but she did do the interview, give her credit for that. So the bump, Andy, that she got after the Democratic convention and after the big announcement and all, it seems to have gotten right back to where we were before Joe Biden really messed up in that one debate. It's just nip and tuck. So what does it tell you? Where are we headed in the presidential election?
I think the one thing that's hurt Vice President Harris is this one commercial that has resonated with people all over about the interview she did with the transsexual folks about that she was proud of allowing prisoners to be funded to have their
Sex change operations.
and I think it was ones that already started before they were incarcerated. And that she has not answered that. That reminds me back to when Senator Helms was going against Governor Hunt. And there's an excellent book about that I read. It covers it. It's great. And I talked to Governor Hunt when I was in office about that particular race. And he said the worst mistake he ever made was he let Senator Helms get out in front of him for 18 months about some various issues, and he said, I didn't answer, and said, that's what killed my race. Well, that's what Vice President Harris is doing. She is not answering this particular charge, and it is resonating, and it's starting to hurt her with not only a lot of the more conservative, but also it's what's hurting her with black males, because that's starting to resonate, and that's why you're seeing President Obama starting to say more and more about black males need to support her, and that is what's starting to deteriorate.
Roger, just to illustrate the movement, before 3 or 4 weeks ago, if you threw out all of the toss-ups in the Real Clear Politics average, Kamala had over 300 electoral votes. And the one that's out today and yesterday, even though it's narrow and it can still go either way, if there were no toss-ups and you just take the Real Clear Politics average of a lot of polls, today Trump would have 312 electoral votes and she would have 226, and it was about the opposite a month ago. So there's obviously been some movement, but is there time for more movement in another
I think
direction?
there is. You know, what she got, the bump she got, were kind of a sugar high, and we knew they were going to go back. Most voters are like the prodigal son, Republicans and Democrats. They'll go out there and see what else is out there, and they'll party and they'll flirt with them, but at the end, they will come home. We've seen that with Nikki Haley voters. They will come home. Black males and Hispanics will eventually come home. This thing's going to be decided by 75,000 voters in 6 states.
All right, Wes?
I don't doubt that it's a close race today. We've certainly seen a momentum change. Harris got a bump because she wasn't Joe Biden. And now her entire race, the only answer she has is, I'm not Donald Trump. At some point, if she doesn't become somebody with a policy, with a plan that she can explain and identify, she loses. I think the race is over.
Well, I'm a skeptic about whether it's over or not, but I do think it's much closer now than it looked like it would be a month ago. All right, we're going to move on to the lightning round. Wes, get us started.
Well, speaking of the Biden-Harris administration, over the last 3 years, we've spent $7.5 billion to build 7 electric charging stations of the 500,000 that were promised. Mike, we spent $42 billion for broadband internet that was promised 3 years ago, but not a single piece of ground has been broken to build that. Both examples are largely due to the various regulations in the bill, specifically for DEI. Meanwhile, Mike Shaw, who until recently was the Oregon Department of Forestry's second in command, was put on administrative leave after complaints from the DEI strategy officer that he was looking beyond gender and identity in hiring and seeking to hire candidates that were actually qualified for the job. The world's upside down.
Andy?
Well, I'm fortunate. Tim's going to put up, the Assembly is a North Carolina newsletter that comes out, and it covers a lot of North Carolina politics and who's in power and this sort of thing. Got a thing this week, they have got a voter guide that is online. You can plug in your physical address of where you live. It will pull up your ballot of who you're voting for, with some of them actually have a biography, which I've never seen one that actually could have a biography. It starts at president, goes all the way down to ballot. Might be a place, if you don't really know your people, now you're not going to get every candidate's biography about their stance or anything, but it's a good place to start.
All right, Roger?
All right, quickly, a year ago, Israel was attacked by Hamas. On October the 7th, 1,200 people were murdered and 250 were kidnapped. The deadliest day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. This week, the mastermind of that massacre, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, was killed by Israeli Defense Forces. Now, reminded of that feeling we got in the United States when Osama bin Laden was killed. And I think the entire free world sends this message to the Israeli Defense Forces. Attaboy.
Good going, guys. I'll pass mine up as we're about out of time, and we'll see you again next week on another edition of Political Smackdown.